For the last few weeks, a lot of people have been saying the same thing. Prompt engineering is dead and loop engineering is your future. You're seeing it from engineers at Anthropic, from people building tools like OpenClaw, and even Adi Osmani at Google posted this. The message is very simple. Stop sitting there and prompting your model every 5 minutes and start building loop instead. And honestly, I rolled my eyes on this at first because every few months we get a new term that's supposed to change everything. But instead of ignoring it, I started reading what the actual builders were saying, and then I noticed a gap. Everyone was just hyping what these loops can do. Almost nobody was explaining what they actually are, or more importantly, when they actually work and when they quietly waste a lot of money. So I did the one thing almost nobody talking about it seemed to be doing. I built one for myself, a real loop on my own machine. Then I gave it a task and I walked away to get some coffee. What happened while I was gone taught me more than everything I read combined. So in the next few minutes, we'll go over what loop engineering actually is, the one-line script that started all of this, what happened when I let it run without me, and where things completely fell apart. So let's get right into it. Let's start with where this actually started. The term loop engineering is only a few weeks old. On June 7th, Adi Osmani at Google published an essay that finally gave it a name. But he was really just putting a label on something two other people already said out loud. Peter Steinberg, the creator of OpenClaw, put it bluntly. You shouldn't be prompting coding agents anymore. You should be designing loops that prompts your agent. And Boris Chandri, the same guy who built Claude Code and he leads Claude Code at Anthropic, went even further. He said, I don't prompt Claude anymore. I have loops running that prompt Claude and figure out what to do. My job is just to write loops. Let that sink in for a second. The person who built one of the most powerful coding agent on the planet says he doesn't prompt it anymore. So what does that actually mean for rest of us? Think about how we all have been using AI for the last 2 years. You type a prompt, you wait, then you get a response back and you read what comes back. Then maybe you type the next thing or you spot a bug in the response. So you paste it back in and ask the AI to fix it for you. Over here, you are acting as the project manager, the code reviewer, and the memory, all for a very fast intern. And here is the uncomfortable truth. In this scenario, you are the loop. But when you look at loop engineering, is the exact moment you stop being the loop and start designing it instead. So what exactly it is? Let's look at the origin story because honestly, it's embarrassingly simple. Back in July 2025, a developer named Jeffrey Huntley published a pattern that he called Ralph Loop. He named it after the famous Simpson character Ralph Wigman. And the entire thing was basically this. That's it. A simple while loop. A fresh instance every single time. But notice something here. The prompt doesn't actually describe the work. It just points out to a spec. The goal lives outside of the loop written in a file where every fresh instance can find it. And you know the crazy part? It actually worked. Not because the loop is clever. That is the dumbest code you will ever write. It worked because of what is around it. To see what I mean, look at what actually happens on every single lap. Anthropic describes the cycle the exact same way every single time. They say, first is gather context, then take action, then verify your work and repeat. Just 4 moves, and that is your whole machine. Alright, now here's one thing. One of those 4 moves comes for free. The take action part, that is already built in with your agents. Tools like Claude Code can edit your file, they can run your command, they can also execute test. The other 3, those are still on you. They are what's around the loop, the part you have to build. And here is what I learned actually building them. So let's break this down. The first one is gather context. The model forgets everything between runs. So it is very important to preserve that context. So every loop keeps its memory on the disk, usually in a plain markdown file that says, here is what is done and here is what failed and here is what you should do next. The agent reads this file at the start of every cycle and then writes back to it at the end of the cycle. Anthropic's own long running agent setup does exactly this: a progress file plus your Git history. Why? Because the agent always forgets, but the repo does not. The second one is verify, and this is the entire game. And here is the rule every serious team should converge on: the one who writes the code cannot be the one who grades it. An AI grading its homework will always gives itself an A. So verification has to come from outside. Maybe some test, a linter, maybe a build that compiles or doesn't compile, or maybe a separate agent whose only job is to be skeptical. And good news, all this is now built into an actual product. Claude Code has a slash goal command. You write a condition like all tests must pass and the lint must be clean. And after every turn, a separate model checks whether that is actually true. The maker never gets to declare victory. Alright, the third one is repeat, which actually means when do you stop? Because all of your tests are green. Maybe just a hard limit on the iteration, like 10 iteration max, or a budget, or a token cap. If you can't write your stop condition down in one sentence, you don't have a loop. You actually have a money furnace. I'll cover more on this later in a minute. So a goal is a memory on a disk, a verification that the AI cannot sweet talk, and a stop condition. And that is loop engineering for you in a nutshell. It is not a breakthrough, it is just an architecture. The AI isn't getting smarter inside that loop. It's just getting more independent. And those are not the same thing. So remember I told you I built a loop? Here is what actually happened. I set it up exactly the same way I described. A goal, a state file, some test acting as a judge, and a clear stop condition. And I gave it just one instruction: to build a feature and do not stop until the tests pass. And I walked away. 45 minutes later, I came back and the terminal was just sitting there. All of my tasks completed and all of the checks passed. And it had written the features, it ran the test, it hit some failures, it read through those failures, then fixed it, and then run the agent to test again. And cycle after cycle without me. And I will be honest with you, the first thing I felt wasn't excitement. I was very suspicious because in my experience, when an AI tells you everything works, what it actually means is it stopped checking. And if it stopped checking, then someone else should step in. So I read every line. I ran the test myself and it was all fine. And that right there, what the run taught me, not all of that reading. Every article I read said the same exact thing. Don't let the maker grade its own work. I nodded along, but only truly understood it when I was standing in front of that quiet terminal, realizing I didn't trust the word done either. The rule isn't for the AI, it is for you. The test decided when it was finished, not the model, and not hovering over the keyboard. I didn't prompt any of those steps. I just designed a loop once and it iterated into cycles and built my feature. Alright, but I have to tell you the other side of story too, because the second loop was a complete disaster. I just got very confident and I told my agent to improve my landing page with no test, no definition of what is better, and no stop condition, just a simple loop. And the first pass was genuinely better, but by the third pass, it started rewriting sections that were already good. And by the sixth pass, it was literally undoing its own changes from earlier passes. And at that point, it wasn't improving my landing page anymore. It was just redecorating. It never converged because it never actually knew what improved meant. It just kept going on, burning tokens and making changes until I reached over and stopped that process myself. And just think about what that actually means. I never gave it the stop condition and I became the stop condition. I was right back to being the loop. And that's right there is the part that hype completely skips. A bad prompt fails once. A bad loop fails on repeat and bills you every single lap. And even Adi Osmani has a line that really stuck with me. Even with verifier saying done, It's just a claim, not a proof, which is why the people running these in production spend most of their effort exactly on one thing, not generation, but verification. Someone put this very perfectly. Writing the verifier is the new prompt engineering. So here are three rules from someone who actually paid the bill. Number one, if the task takes just a few seconds, don't build the loop. Number two, if you cannot define success in a simple sentence, do not build a loop. And number three, if there are no real programmatic way to check the work, it will loop forever with full confidence. Oh, one more thing before I let you go. There is a whole crowd of engineers out there who think everything I just said is just a trendy rebrand of while loop. Well, they are actually right. Alright, now as I promised, we would talk about the critics because while half of the internet was declaring prompt engineering dead, the other half was losing their mind laughing. There is a HackerOne thread with over 1800 comments all making this exact same argument. An agent is just a while loop with an LLM call. And you know what? They're actually right. Because anyone who has built a CI pipeline has been designing loops for years. Because Kubernetes runs on control loops forever. The official docs literally uses a thermostat as an example. Your thermostat has been doing loop engineering even before you were born. And you know what? Nobody wrote a Twitter thread about that. The loop itself is old. And here is what the eye roll actually misses. The structure of the loop didn't change. You know what changed? It is what inside it. A thermostat checks one number, but this thing, it reads your code base, it writes a fix, and then it argues with a second agent about whether that fix is actually real, and then updates its own to-do list. And the while loop was never the hard part. The verifier is the hard part. The stop condition is the hard part. Deciding what the loop is actually allowed to touch is the hard part. So when people ask me, is loop engineering real or just hype? I think that's the wrong question to ask. The right question is the one that decides whether your loop makes you faster or just makes mistakes cheaper. How does this thing know when it's done? Answer that. And the buzz doesn't matter. Okay, so if you ask me, is loop engineering the future? Honestly, I would say yes, but not because prompts are dead, because every loop is still full of prompts. You just stop typing them live. Even Adi Osmani, the guy who literally named this thing, says he's still skeptical. He watches his token cost and prompts directly when it makes sense. And here's the real shift. Two people can build the same exact loop and get totally opposite results. Because one uses it to move faster on work they deeply understand, and the other one will use it to avoid understanding the work at all. And the loop cannot tell the difference, but you can. So build a loop, define done before you define anything else, and never let the maker be the checker. And then step back, go make a coffee or step outside, have a walk. And if you want to build your first loop this week, I put together a free loop engineering starter kit checklist. It has the stop condition template, the verification setup, and the exact state file I use. Link is in the description below. And if this helped you get past the hype, hit subscribe. I make these videos every single week. I'm Yudi, signing off, the LLM Architect.